So thank you so much. I'm looking out in the crowd here, and thank you so much for such an amazing turnout. Of course, here to celebrate my mom's farewell. So many of you, one-on-one, have shared already, individually, calling us at home, and many of you have wanted to be a part of the celebration and will share about her and about my mom as a sister in Christ, as a friend. My dad has already shared about my mom as a wife, of course, and so as Santi's kids today, we want to give you a glimpse into her as a mother to us, knowing full well, of course, that what we're able to share with you in just a few mere minutes will certainly not, could not ever possibly encapsulate the richness of her impact on us. So we'll try to give you just some small glimpses, certainly. And of course, I remembered my mom, always have remembered her as being very loving, lighthearted, full of humor, highly self-driven, highly spirited, strong-willed, and of course she'd always been looking out for her family over the years. And she modeled many godly virtues well before she found Christ. In short, she has always been a good person. She's, as we've heard, she's a very hard worker, I remember, in every way. Mom would take on 2 jobs or extra overtime shifts over the years during our younger years, certainly during the financially leaner times when our dad was laid off from work, of course to make up for the shortfall and be able to cover costs when it came to extracurricular, making sure we ate healthy, going on vacations. These are some of the things certainly that she felt were so important for us to either get ahead or to have a happy childhood. And so not only was she a hard worker, but she was very determined to overcome the career hurdles too often faced by new immigrants to a new town, a new place, by taking years worth of night courses to grasp onto some level of career security, employment security. And so in contrast to how we, the kids might have understood Mom to be bulletproof in the sense of her not being easily offended or, how she could easily shrug things off and not take things to heart. These traits were mostly on account of her strong determination and stubbornness at times. And she really had a gift, however, in recognizing the good in people, and it was these experiences that she stored deeply in her heart, that she took to heart. In her early days as a new immigrant in Toronto, and of course these are my recollections as a young girl, there were caring, generous people, many of these immigrants before her, who were eager to share their wisdom about how to make it in a new place. Some of these people were the colleagues she worked with at Bobrick, a company she worked at in Scarborough for 37 years, many of whom have turned out, and thank you so much. Many of these colleagues with whom she shared long ties since day one at work. Others were from within the Indonesian community. Many were her elders, several of them women, to whom she paid much respect and whose company and wisdom and conversation she sought, since she felt alone here in a way in Toronto without her own parents, without her own siblings' company. I could remember all the visits she would take us on as a family to this elderly person's apartment, to that old folks' home. Each visit reminding us of the importance in making time for the seniors, because we, as younger people, she'd remind us we can offer them some cheer. And what about the several women she reached out to within the community who might need temporary residence, a place to stay, and who might need some company? While growing up, I can remember having several women stay with us, all because they were invited by Mom. So at some point, simply being a good person wasn't enough for Mom. I can remember quite vividly her journey to seek her spiritual calling. where ultimately, by God's grace, she was led here to this church and turned her life over to Jesus. And so it's no surprise that soon after joining the church, she wholeheartedly served in various different ministries that she felt so passionate about. Newcomers ministry, welcome ministry, seniors ministry, pantry outreach, and of course, who could ever forget, to mention the hospitality and kitchen ministry. So the church was her family, and so therefore she cared for it and its people accordingly. More recently, I grew to appreciate my mom as a grandmother to my kids, tirelessly and unceasingly, certainly during the first few days of having newborns, but certainly throughout all my children's young lives. Grandma would sleep over on a cot, but when that proved uncomfortable, she would sleep on the kids' bedroom floor, and in order to help me care for the kids and spend as much time as possible with them. Of course, with our first child and their first grandchild, Rachel, Grandma and Grandpa were over at our place every weekend and sometimes midweek. But I can remember at some point, after Abigail was born, our second child, the visits seemed to get slightly less frequent. Although for my grandma's standards, she was always around, and she consistently was bringing us care packages every week. So, selfishly at some point, sensing that my interests were competing with all the activity and her involvement with church, I recall asking Mom why she was always volunteering for this and that, to cook for church, to go on prayer drives, to go to cell group every week, to go to seniors fellowship, to go on another outreach of some kind. And she, she responded very thoughtfully. I can remember just the conversation in my kitchen, that it didn't feel right to her to simply enjoy God's blessings to her family. And of course, she was reflecting on the joy she took from her grandchildren and from her children now grown up. But that she felt so moved to be a channel of blessing to others and to work for God because He was so good to her. So in closing, as I mentioned, Mom was always a good person, a great mom, but better than this, she knew Jesus. And she's left a lasting legacy behind, having led all of us, her family, her kids, my dad, to Christ while alive. So it's with this understanding that by knowing God, He was her beacon, a guiding light that pointed her to her God-given purpose, and something immensely more significant to her than just being a good person. And so we have to trust that God allowed her, to fulfill this purpose. So there's definitely a void we are facing now that she is gone. But we hold on to the trust that she's where she ultimately wants to be and wanted to be in heaven, as we all wish, and she's there certainly as acknowledgement for being a good and faithful servant.